I read a little of let me start that again.
Yeah, cut. The entire episode is a bloopers reel.
I saw The Day of the Jackal.
Oh, you watched the movie?
I watched the movie. I did. In my off time, in my free time, I did. I had to do it in 2 sittings because it is a bit of a long film.
It's 2.5 hours. What did you think?
Yeah, interesting film. Very, very hard-nosed, really hard-nosed film. And it's funny because it sort of has this 007 feel. You've got this, assassin and this historical, kill de Gaulle kind of movement, which I had no idea that that was an assassination attempt on de Gaulle, or that there was an entire movement in France that wanted him dead because of
he withdrew from Algeria. They were really
that's
pissed.
Right.
The paratroopers.
Liberating Algeria, right? Was it liberating, or was it just that they withdrew? What actually?
France got out of Algeria. France got out of Algeria and said, "We're done. We're not." I'm not sure, but basically, de Gaulle got France out of Algeria, and the paratroopers or the elite military troops were not amused in any way whatsoever.
Right. It was like Cuba for us.
Yeah, it's also sort of like Vietnam. I mean, I think that party sort of weighed on, Vietnam also for France. During Dien Bien Phu had happened, and I think de Gaulle was aware of that and said, you know what?
So was this like a colonial thing where Algeria was like cheap labor? You go and live like kings when
that's where is that where Camus grew up?
Camus is from Algeria, exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
I think Oran.
I was always curious about, because
the plague is about. I think that's where it takes place.
Right.
And we're probably mangling this horribly, but yes, Day of the Jackal.
Everything.
but we're treading on even more tender toes at this point.
That's true.
But yes, there was, if you read the Wikipedia thing about Frederick Forsyth, he was a reporter and actually he covered that. He was involved in the reporting on the OAS, which I think was the Organization of the Secret Army, which were all these dissident military people who were pissed off at de Gaulle for abandoning them and pulling out of Algeria, and they wanted revenge or whatever they wanted. So it's based very much in fact.
Right. Even though this guy, the Jackal, is probably completely fictional, right? There's no record of him historically, I don't think.
I don't know, but what do you think about the feel of the? I mean, to me, the feel of the film was so interesting.
Yeah, what did I call it? Hard. It's like a hard-boiled film. It's I don't know. It's like it isn't. It's not like quite like a Hong Kong, murder film. It's I'm thinking of like Chow Yun-fat, who's this fantastic actor in these Hong Kong films. But what I found kind of wild was you're sort of rooting for the Jackal, right?
Oh yeah,
because
he's Wile E. Coyote.
He's like avoiding things. He's planning things very carefully, and he's going to get the job done. And he's so careful and professional and all this weird stuff. But then he just starts doing this awful crap, and you start to hate him, and then you start rooting for the cops to kill him.
Right.
And that was really interesting, I thought, especially for a film of its time. I just thought it was really hard edge for its time.
But I just love the cinematography. I love near the end, it's all these huge street scenes of Paris.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they did that, but it starts making you think of like, that gritty streets of like, the 7-Ups and the French Connection and all those movies that are being made at the same time, where you have all these like very sort of, real life, the camera in the streets kind of vibe rather than something that's extensively rehearsed. So there's kind of a mixture of that because you have, you also, but it's not it's not the Bourne Identity. It's not high tech. No,
it's none of that. It's not Mission Impossible. It's not.
There's a little bit like the gun maker. There's the kind of gun that he gets made and how he hides it, and
he has this idea for this rifle, basically this assassin's
And I guess because
rifle.
to a certain degree, we can't really see that movie the way it was seen the first time. Probably when people first saw that was like on the level of the Bourne Identity. But now, to us, it just seems almost laughably naive.
It was coming out with the Broccoli films, the 007 films, right around the same time. So it didn't have any fancy he had a nice car for a while. And then
but it didn't have machine guns. License plates didn't flip and stuff like that. Yeah, I thought it was really cool. I thought it was a really fascinating film. I love the cinematography. I love the pace of it. With so many of the films today, it's just like everything is so tightly, everything just is so propulsive in the movies and so heavily. It's much more relaxed back then. And it's 2.5 hour film, and it really takes its time to sort of build up to a crescendo. And I love how fast it ends. It's like the final scene is like 27 seconds long, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, that's it. I guess we're done.
And then they never figured out who he was. And I thought that was interesting too, because I thought it was a gap in the writing when the Jackal says something like, send it to me at my address. When he's first getting hired,
right?
There's in terms of I think it was it payment he was going to send, or no, he was having the payment wired to a Swiss account,
bank account,
but there was some kind of correspondence that was being sent to his address. And I said, no way does he have an address you're going to send something to, right? He's the Jackal. He's like a top assassin, and it turns out, of course, it was a stolen address. And at a stolen location, it was actually somebody else. It was consistent, and it was really kind of brutal in terms of its portrayal of the main character, and the portrayal of the movement too. These generals that are sort of hiding out from the French government. They know. And then there's a betrayal in the
and there's torture.
Yeah.
I mean, I bet you when it came out in whatever came out like 72, I bet you it was a shocker.
It was a bit of a shocker today, I thought.
But a good film. I thought but a really well made film, and moves the plot along. It's sort of the DNA for a lot of things that I think came after. I think it's Robert Ludlum and Frederick Forsyth were the two guys, one of the two main guys who gave rise to this whole genre. I think it was Ludlum who did all the Bourne stuff. And Frederick Forsyth did this, the Odessa File, the Boys from Brazil, all this stuff. We talked about it last time. Anyway, so I'm glad you enjoyed it. I thought it was a really interesting trip back to a different era.
Yeah, definitely enjoyed. And then I have started the book by Robert Whitehill. Deadrise is the name of the book. And it's got a slow start, so you need to stick with it. He's not he drops you in with a kind of a shock, but the shock doesn't mean anything because you haven't really connected with the main character yet. And a lot of the beginning of the book is connecting with this main character, which I believe is the main character for a number of books that follow. And there is also this very mercurial bad guy that just seems like a goof, kind of a political hanger-on,
right,
in the beginning, and then you realize is actually kind of a G. Gordon Liddy type bad guy. So interesting. I haven't been able to read very quickly. I've been just falling asleep because I've been exhausted. Because I'm getting up at 5. I'm doing yoga, but
5.
I'm getting up at 5 and doing yoga.
Okay.
And I've been doing that as an experiment because I thought I had read somewhere that some people exercise first thing in the morning because the body builds up cortisol when you sleep, and cortisol is a stress hormone. So if you sweat a little bit in the morning, then you can kind of burn that off. Now, I don't know how accurate that is, but it seemed like a reasonable hypothesis. So I thought I would test it out by getting up before everybody else and then doing yoga first thing in the morning. And I think it has a good effect. Plus, I'm doing yoga every morning. I'm not doing a lot.
Yeah. I found that if I get up first thing, and I may do this tomorrow morning, it's getting nice and chilly around here. You get up first thing in the morning, you take a nice walk around the park.
Yeah.
You get in like a half mile to a mile walk. I think it helps set the dials a little bit. It helps sand the edges off a little bit. Because the great thing about exercise is that it's an absolute sense of accomplishment. I did that today.
Yeah.
There's nothing to argue. It's not like work where like, I don't know if that HTML code is the,
Oh, Jesus.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But at least with exercise, it's an absolute achievement. I got my fresh air. I got out. I participated in the world outside. I got some exercise. I got some fresh, all that kind of stuff.
And walking does something to the brain, I think.
Yeah,
walking activates certain thoughts you wouldn't ordinarily have if you're just walking and not also listening to an audiobook or a podcast. That is an absolute good. I agree.
And every time I do it around here, I can't listen to anything. It's amazing. I say, okay, I should really load a podcast or a book. And I'm like, I can't stand to listen to anything anymore. I'm really tired of listening to people talking.
Speaking of which, if you'd like to support the podcast, go to patreon.com/Jim.
Yeah. I just, for some reason, I don't want to hear. I've been listening to stuff for decades, and all I want to do is just go out there and walk and just look around and just look at the leaves and look at the water. And I think it's easy to underestimate the importance of the salutary effect of just a human being looking at nature. Aside from all of the poetic and the transcendental values of it, I think there's something good for the brain. I think we're creatures that have been hardwired for a gazillion years to read the landscape and to look at the landscape and to analyze the landscape. And I think if you sit in a room staring at a screen too long, you go a little nutty. And I think it's really good just to go out and stare at a tree for a little while, because I think your eye sort of reacts to that. But anyway. So that's why you're doing yoga at 5:00.
Yeah. And I like the idea of walking, but I'm really enjoying doing this because it was getting to the point where I was having like hip pain and knee pain, and it was like I used to do yoga a lot, and right now I don't feel like I could do any of it, but I'm just doing a little bit, and it's totally loosening up, and it works.
Yeah. But now you're exhausted.
Well, the thing is, I'm getting up at 5, so I go to sleep at 9, and that pretty much 9 sharp. And so reading, until 10 is not always
in the
cards. Work out.
So should I read Deadrise? Do we want to?
Yeah, I think it'd be great because I think we could have Robert on as a guest.
Okay.
If we do, it would be. He's got like a lot of books out, so. If we at least read one, we have something to talk about.
Yeah.
We can find out more of what's in store for the other books. But it is along the lines of The Day of the Jackal. Applebee's Grill is calling me. That's interesting. It is along the lines of The Day of the Jackal. So it's in that milieu. There's the whole thriller type.
International thriller.
There is some kind of, it's a political, I can't quite grasp what's going on, but there's a sunken ship, and
there's a MacGuffin,
and it's a MacGuffin, and it takes place on the Chesapeake Bay, so it's all based around Robert's stomping grounds.
Right. So it sounds like we got a heavy dose of one of the granddaddies of them all, Tom Clancy.
Yeah, there's right, and it's stuff I just never read, so that I think that'll be interesting.
Well, it's interesting since we have nothing else prepared for this evening. I read a lot of Tom Clancy. I read Hunt for Red October, Patriot Games, Clear and Present Danger, Sum of All Fears, and I probably read one or two other in addition to that. Hunt for Red October is a fabulous book. It's a great book. It's really different from all of his other books.
there's also Patriot Games, which is kind of weird, which is about the IRA, and it's a different thing altogether.
Right.
But Hunt for October is a fabulous book. It's a really good book and a great opening book. I just never dug with each book he did after that. I lost more and more interest as it went on, because what Hunt for October is about, it's fun. It's about honor. It's about problem solving. It's about, being clever.
Right.
How do we manage to steal a Soviet nuclear missile submarine without the Soviets knowing we've taken it?
Well, he's defecting, right? I mean, I saw the movie. I didn't read.
Oh, the movie's great. Movie's fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, Sean Connery
is awesome, and Alec Baldwin. What?
I just wanted to mention, there is only one actor, although the main actor in The Day of the Jackal is fantastic. I've never, somebody Fox, like not Michael Fox, but like Jeffrey Fox or something is his name.
Never heard of him again.
Never, it just disappeared, but he was incredible and like sort of a beautiful physical specimen. He was like not an ounce of fat on the guy, and super muscular, really physical performance and amazing, really great acting. But then everybody else, you just don't know. I mean, because they're long time dead, but Derek Jacobi is in that.
And what does he play?
Derek Jacobi plays the assistant to the detective, the chief inspector.
That's right. And by the way, the chief detective, he's been in other things. In fact, I saw him just a couple of nights ago. He was the abbot of the monastery in The Name of the Rose. Oh. And in fact, he's been in a lot of films. I think a lot of them are French films. That's why we don't know about him. But supposedly, like, he's a big actor in France. But anyway, Hunt for October, great movie, fabulous movie of a fabulous book. But the great thing about the book is that it's fundamentally a really lighthearted book. There's no hatred. There's sort of this simmering revenge in the heart of the captain, the Soviet submarine captain, but it's not a big deal. It doesn't define his life. He's just somebody who's going to make something happen. But there's nothing grim about it. And then Tom Clancy started writing more books and became more about revenge and disappointment and humiliation. They just got I never liked him. Again, one theme we keep returning to is, why do we like the books that we like? And I've already said a lot of it's humor, but also a lot of it is about, I don't want to hear about people's humiliation, some traumatic thing that happened to them when they were 9 and how that forces them to become a serial killer. Can we write a book that doesn't, I'm sure that happens, and I'm pegging this microphone out, I think. I'm sure that happens, but can we write a book that doesn't have that? And you do. You have The Hunt for Red October, which is all about honor, humility, the truth winning out. It's a great book. It's a lot of fun. But then later on, he just sort of became, Tom's book started getting more and more morose and dark, and mean and violent, and I didn't like it. So anyway, I don't know how. You're talking about Whitehill, Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah. So we've got that on the radar.
Okay, Deadrise.
Deadrise.
And yesterday, I was absolutely tormented by that song that I had recommended to you.
Which song was that?
Color of Noize.
Color of Noize.
So I have this thing where I go, I remember I sent somebody an email about that. And then I spend 2.5 hours looking for the email and I never find it. And I know I'm losing it. I'm getting older, so I'm going to have to lose it at some point, but I don't want it to be just right now. And yesterday I tore the house up. I mean, metaphorically speaking, I tore the house apart for like an hour looking for that song.
Wow.
And the way I finally found it, the reason why I wasn't finding it was that I was searching on emails from Jim Infantino. But in this case, the emails back and forth with Jim Infantino. But in this case, it was emails back and forth with Slab Media. And Noize was not spelled Noise. Is spelled Noize. And that's why I wasn't finding it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And so I finally found it, and it was a touchdown. It is one of life's little unsullied triumphs that I may be losing it, but not today.
No, I mean, that's hard enough. I mean, that it's, I think that's excusable.
Yes. And so I'm never going to forget that song again. Derrick Hodge, Color of Noize, Noize. I recommend that everybody listen to that tune.
Okay.
It's about 5 minutes long, and I think you listen to it too. And the great thing is that it's not really a song, but it's great. It's really fun to listen to. So
maybe, anyway. Yeah, I don't remember it. So, I'll go back and
it's just
and
like this maelstrom of people playing. I think it's two drummers playing this incredibly fast beat. This incredibly fast, very improvisational beat. And like just a whole bunch of musicians swirling around them playing these. There is a chord pattern. There is an overall chord pattern, but the rhythm at which they're playing bears no discernible relationship to what the drums are doing. And it really feels like you're Dorothy inside the tornado, inside the twister and stuff. And here comes the guy with the B3 and he just blows by you, playing his B3 as he goes flying past your head. And here comes the bassist and he goes flying past your head. And it's just a complete tornado of sound, and I find it really exhilarating because there's really no way you can tap your feet to it. Like there's none of that. There is nothing to hold on to. There are no grid lines at all in this music in any way whatsoever, and it's really kind of fun. And sort of tying back to what I was saying before, it's like when you look at the trees blowing in the wind, and there's no pattern to it, but there's something immensely satisfying about it. There's something unbelievably organic and immensely satisfying watching 10,000 leaves flip up and down randomly according to wind and air blowing across them. It's the same with this piece of music. It's just, it makes sense, but not in any way that you're used to. So anyway, Derrick Hodge, Color of Noize, Noize. Go to YouTube and just watch it there.
Yeah, I will check that out.
So what else is going on? What about your California law? Do you want to talk about something else?
Yeah, that's boy, I don't really even know where to begin with this. I sent you I have to look up the
text of the bill.
The bill, even the number of the bill. It is California AB 1757. And I don't have the latest on it. Let me see if it's in the news. All right, so no, it may be passing. It says so the latest from yesterday. California Assembly bill on website accessibility downgraded from potential lawsuit tsunami to 2024 weather watch. So this is new to me. I'm just reading it from jdsupra.com. The synopsis is AB 1757, which would set a standard for website accessibility for businesses in California, has been held in the legislature to resume discussion in 2024. This is good news, and this is a short article. I'm just going to read a bit of it. While Southern California and Burning Man revelers were hit with unprecedented severe storms in August, the California legislature has given businesses at least a temporary reprieve from legislation that would likely have caused a tsunami of lawsuits on its own. As we reported, AB 1757 was seemingly well-intentioned to provide clarity around how websites must be coded to be considered accessible to individuals with disabilities and thus in compliance with the UNRRA Act and the Disabled Persons Act, California's corollaries to the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA.
Yeah.
However, as drafted, it had some serious shortcomings that may well have resulted in even greater litigation and liability for businesses that we've already seen, and newly imposed liability on website and mobile app developers. So on August 21st, 2023, the bill was held in Senate Appropriations Committee at the request of the bill's author. While the storm has passed for now, we expect to see the bill's return in 2024 and hope revisions will be made to actually accomplish the bill's stated goal of reducing lawsuits while increasing accessibility and providing useful guidance to businesses. So the upshot, because I read the August version of the bill, and it just, I mean, if I had hair, it would stand on end. what it does, so ADA is law. You need to have your websites accessible. And gradually, I've, of course, been coding my website so that type can be made larger and so that the page is readable and so that things are in a hierarchical method. And recently, I've partnered with a third-party site called accessibe that has a widget that costs quite a bit of money, but solves all your accessibility problems under ADA. And just for people who don't understand that a website cannot just be useful only to people with all their senses. If you have a problem seeing, if you have a problem with mobility, you have to be able to code a website in order that a person can tab through the buttons, that it's labeled properly, so that a sightless browser, a spoken browser, can tell you what's on the page. Otherwise, just like a building, it's not accessible to people with disability. So, to the best of my ability, I'm able to kind of code things, but once the user starts to add their own content, they may leave the alt text off of an image, and then that might fail an ADA test, or what's WCAG.
Right.
The California bill said all websites for any business in California need to be WCAG AA accessible, 2.1 AA accessible.
Yep.
Or you can not only sue the business owner, you can sue the web designer. Yeah.
Yeah, they got a lot of money to go after.
And that means, and every website needs to be audited not only automatically, not only using software like accessibe will do, but by a competent accessibility consultant, a certified accessibility consultant.
Are there any thresholds on the businesses? Like you have to have at least 10 employees or more? I mean,
no.
What's the jurisdiction? Well,
there was nothing in the bill about that. It was literally, and it was also unclear that it would only affect California businesses. I mean, every website is viewable in California. So if your business is in Chicago, but your website is visible in California, can they go after you? That was sort of an open question. And yeah, so I mean, and also like you can't just rely on software to fix your problems. So it really made, it was like, first of all, just relying on software to fix your problems, for some people, increasing your web hosting from, say, $29 a month to $99 a month in order to include the widget that will make the website fully accessible into WCAG, that might not work for a musician out of Arkansas who just wants to tell people when their band is playing.
Yeah, but nobody's going to sue that person.
Yeah, except that if they do, under the California law, they not only come after that person, they could come after me. And I have hundreds of sites up there. So that's hundreds of lawsuits potentially. And I just have to have faith that none of my clients are high profile enough for anybody to come after me. But it's really, I contemplated, I'm like, what do? I can drive an Uber. I can work at Starbucks. I can do something else.
It's really cool.
Drive a truck.
Well, this is one of those extraordinarily rare events on this podcast where this is a topic where I actually know something. I work for a university system, and I work not only for a university system, but also for a public university system. And this is a big topic with universities, which is the accessibility of web pages. It's a big deal. Accessibility in general is a big deal. And there's a million directions in which this conversation can go. But what I can tell you is that recently, the Department of Justice issued yet another Dear Colleague letter to all the universities, I think many of the universities in America. Now, despite its warm and fuzzy sounding name, a Dear Colleague letter is not the letter you want to get. The Dear Colleague letter is the DOJ saying, we've had it with you people.
Wow.
And this is like, I don't think this is the first Dear Colleague letter they've sent. So the whole point is that if somebody violates the ADA, it's the Department of Justice that has to bring the lawsuit. The Department of Justice, basically, long story short, there is much criticism to be leveled against American universities about the accessibility of their information resources, which includes not only their websites, but their other software that's used by universities, and even things like fax machines and ATMs and things like that. That should be accessible. And there have been many very high-profile lawsuits brought against American universities for accessibility. And I forget whether it's the American Association of the Blind or the American Association of the Deaf. I'm not sure, but one of those. There's definitely, they're definitely serious about it. They're getting plaintiffs to bring cases, and they're winning big awards. All you have to do is just look up Accessibility Lawsuit University, and you will get a fine list of many, many universities that have been walloped over the past few decades over accessibility issues. And I've been directly involved with this as part of my job duties at some of the places I've worked at. I've been involved with accessibility issues. And there's many things I could say. I think the most important thing is that one thing I tell people is that the most important, well, it doesn't really impact what you're talking about, but what gets people really unhappy is when the student says, "Hey, professor, I can't see this assignment you gave us because I'm colorblind. Mm-hmm. So I can't see this thing." And the professor, and the professor says, "Well, take a different class then." Wrong answer, professor. Wrong answer. So a lot of it is not technological. A lot of it is what we call administrative, which is the from a university standpoint. And universities know this. All the universities I work with, they have a disability coordinator, an accessibility coordinator, which is great because you want a human being. If you're somebody with a disability and you encounter a problem, it's going to be a stressful, unhappy situation. And you don't want to be talking to a chatbot, okay? Yeah. You want a human being that you can talk to. And they all do. And they all have the coordinator. And then what the coordinator has to do is the second most important thing is to have a very good email address, a memorable email address or a website address. Because what you're going to do is you're going to pound that email address and that website address into the cranium of every living creature in every employee of the university. Right. And you're going to teach the faculty and staff, if anybody comes up to you and mentions anything that could be remotely related to being a problem with disability, you stop and you call me, or you refer that person to me, but get that person to me and let me handle it. Don't say something like, "Well, maybe anthropology is not a good major for you." Wrong answer. Wrong answer. Just don't say anything. Just refer the student or refer the employee to me and let me handle it. And there's a couple of basic things. Contrast is a big issue. I mean, I tell people that 90% of accessibility can be put on a business card and kept in your wallet. And people have fought me on me tooth and nail. One, black text on a white background. Yep. Do not deviate from that unless you have a really good reason that you need to. Second off the bat, you can't indicate anything purely by the use of color. Right. That's the other big one. Perhaps the single most important thing in the world. Don't use pictures at all. If you have to use a picture, the picture has to have alt text on it. And it has to be a description of the picture. Right. The alt text has to be meaningful. It can't just be like keyword stuffing or this is all technical, but that's interesting. I violate one of those. I I do not underline my links in my web designs because I think it looks awful. Yeah, but you kind of have to do, because otherwise, or you have to, or some other indication. Yeah, there's some indication font that isn't. It's bold, right, or bold, whatever. But it has to be something that's not related to color. It has to be something which is a shape change.
Right.
So it's that, and there's a lot of other differences. There's a lot of other things to watch out for, but that's 90% of it right there. I mean, the most important thing is that you have somebody who's going to talk to the student and say, okay, what's your problem, and how are we going to fix this? And
there's also people with epilepsy, right? I mean, you actually need to be very sensitive not to be creating like flashing graphics. You know, there's a ton of things like that.
Right. But the big ones are hearing impairment and audio impairment, visual impairment. Those are the two giant ones.
Absolutely. But the WCAG has been evolving. So it's not you know, the what was okay for accessibility 5 years ago is not okay anymore.
Yeah.
So you need to stay on top of it.
You do.
Slab Media uses a widget. You can check it out, slabmedia.com. There's a little person. People have probably seen these things now. You click on that, and then it changes the view of the website depending on, you know, your personal preference. And of course, that widget is highly accessible, and it comes up first to a tab browser and things like that.
Well, the thing that I find fascinating is the relationship. If I could summarize it in as small number of words as possible, it'd be we're all disabled.
Yeah,
because we've all benefited enormously from the changes that have been spearheaded by disabled people. A lot of the features that we love most in the gadgets we use and the technology we use were originally designed to help people with disabilities, like backup cameras.
Yeah.
You know, if you're mobility impaired, let's say you have a problem with your back and you can't turn around, you know, a backup camera is great, but a backup camera helps everybody. And the fact that, you know, on your keyboard, you can just hit Control Plus and Control, you know, zooming in and out now is so effortless. You know, you could just use gestures and just expand and contract things.
Or even expanding the size of the text on a properly coded website. You can,
it's tremendous. And all that stuff was done for people with disabilities and done for the elderly, but they benefit everybody. And they're so, you know, lit keyboards, all these things, everybody loves them. And so, because sometimes you meet up with resistance and people are like, oh my God, I got to do this to my website because it's just for people with disability. It's like, dude, it helps everybody.
Interestingly, I got started in web design because I read a book by a guy named Jeffrey Zeldman called Designing with Web Standards back in 1999. Wow. Or I may have read it in 2001, but he worked on the w3.org. He really founded that with a number of other people, and they started creating standards because at the time, remember, Microsoft had a browser and Netscape had a browser. Those are the main ones. Mozilla, was there a Mozilla browser back then? I'm not sure.
There's Netscape Communicator and there's Internet Explorer.
Right, they all had different rules in terms of how to interpret HTML. Ooh. And Jeffrey was like, this is garbage. We need to have unified. Even Microsoft was even launching their own form of JavaScript, which I forgot what they called, ActionScript or something like that. And there was Flash all over the web, which was completely standards free. And Zeldman was like, no, here's how you code a web page. You separate the style sheet out from the content. Yep. Your content should have no code relating to appearance at all. No layout in your code. All the layout happens in the style sheet. And so I found that fascinating because at the time it was really like inventing the Gutenberg press. It was really inventing a completely new form of publishing information, literally. And here was a guy who was saying, here are the standards. These are the standards we all need, and here's why.
Right.
You know,
the best practices.
Best practices. You can separate all your ActionScript out, your JavaScript out. You can separate all your style sheet out. And one thing for accessibility nobody seems to have done is kill the style sheet. Because if you kill the style sheet on a well-coded web page, there should be nothing but an outline of the content. Right now we have reader view, right? You can some websites or some apps you can click on reader view, and then it sort of has a style sheet that simplifies everything. But in theory, if you just remove the style sheet from a page, you would have black text on a white background in Times New Roman with all the links bright blue and underlined, and it would look like crap.
Yep.
But it would be very accessible.
Yep. And I remember probably 8 years ago,
There's a company that we were talking to that's what they did, which is when people went to your website, if they clicked on the accessibility button, what this vendor would do was in real time suck in all your code of your HTML pages and redisplay it exactly like you said, which is Times New Roman, and everything in screen reader format, stuff like that.
Well, on a well-coded website, it's simple. There's usually there's a series of now there's like 82 different style sheets, and there's the ones that are included from Font Awesome and from Google and from Google Fonts and all these others. So it's a little more complicated, but you could, in theory, rewrite the header on the fly to just kill the style sheets. Anyway, who cares? But
well, I think we all care because I think it's a fascinating. I think I think it's a fascinating topic, which is that this has been a long and painful dialogue that I've been a part of, and people have really fought this. In my experience, people are like, "Oh, I got to deal. Oh, we got to do this. Oh,
yeah." Why high contrast? High contrast.
It's like,
right? I mean, I want really light, really thin, like Helvetica 100, which is like the thinnest hairline version of a typeface.
Yeah,
and I want it to be in kind of
dark gray on an ecru background.
On an ecru.
Seriously, I've gotten
patterned
to the point.
Background.
I'm seriously. I mean, I'm seriously getting ready to write a letter to like the Atlassian
because that expresses me. That's my inner style. That's who I am.
This vendor I work with all the time, Atlassian. I want to send him an email saying, do you guys know about access? I can't read it. I mean, I'm hitting 60.
Right.
I am 60. I got one foot firmly planted in the land of the disabled here, kids. My eyes, I've had multiple operations on my eyes. And I'm finding this stuff really hard to see. And so, but anyway, back to the original thing, which is that I think it's a really interesting thing, which is that after a while, you just get used to it and people adopt it. And they start building it in and they say, okay, we're going to naturally do that. Yeah, let's not put pictures in here because we don't really need the pictures and it just gets everybody unhappy. And as I said, I think it's just amazing how it has benefited everybody and made for better websites. And also just all the features that have been designed. There's millions of them. That also is a fascinating thing I love thinking about too. And I'll stop after this because I'm just free form ranting. But I just love looking at a bicycle, like looking at a modern bicycle or a car. But a car is kind of complex. Bicycle's a little easier. Look at a bicycle today, and then look at the bicycles that were being made in like 1900. Yeah, and you just realize that there are thousands of minute little improvements that make the modern bicycle so much more useful, durable, just so much better than a bicycle in 1910. I mean, the bicycle in 1910 was great, but the bicycle today is just absolutely fabulous. It's lighter, it's stronger, it's more maneuverable. You can do more things with it. And it's the same thing with all the technology with these websites. We just get better and better at it. And we make better websites and people fight against these things like accessibility standards, but they're actually pretty, and they probably fight against your guy doing his W3 standards too. But you know what?
Well, they did. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was adopted. It was adopted.
And then things get better. And finally, I'm so happy that Apple has been forced to put a USB-C adapter on their phones. Yes. Humble. The giant has been humbled. You've got to dress just like the rest of the great unwashed. You've got to mingle with the rest of us proletarians, and you have to put this filthy this filthy common USB-C plug on your gorgeous golden phones. But no, I'm not bitter. I'm not angry about it at all.
Well, as our previous guest Chris Chandler has said in one of his songs, we are all able-bodied temporarily.
Yep.
How's that for like a closing comment? Does that work?
I think, yeah, it's pretty good.
I mean,
if it's a closing comment, you're not supposed to say stuff after it.
Right. Yeah. Quiet. And scene. Yeah, I've run. So,
there is a coda?
Yes.
Do you want a coda? Or
Yeah.
do you not want a coda?
Hit the coda.
And this might get me into trouble, and we may have to snip this off.
Okay.
I may have to think about this because I'm always very worried about talking about things having to do with work.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is the state of Texas has fairly well-developed rules regarding the accessibility of information resources and websites run by state agencies and state institutions of higher education.
Mm-hmm.
I can probably look up TAC 213. I'm not sure. I think that may be the project management, but whatever. It's TAC something or other. And one of the interesting ones is there's all these rules about the accessibility of your software and the accessibility and making sure that you buy accessible software.
Mm.
And this has caused tremendous arguments. Because first off the bat, no software is accessible. If again, it's the WCAG and there's various standards you use to judge the accessibility of software. There used to be these things, now they're called ACRs, they used to be called VPATs. So if you were a software manufacturer, you did a voluntary product accessibility template, a VPAT, that you filled out. And you said, yeah, my stuff is accessible because of this. And I answer all these questions and I add up all the numbers and I'm either accessible or however much. And that was superseded by the ACR, which is the Accessibility Compliance Report or something like that.
Right.
But what it basically boils down to is that no software is 100% compliant.
Right. Well, yeah, there are problems. There are problems. I mean, try to picture a compliant version of the game Myst.
Yeah.
I mean, or really most games, like Bubble Pop. How do you make that accessible?
Right. So the whole point is that what the law says is that all the software purchased by Texas state agencies have to be accessible or they have to have an exception granted. And the exception has to be signed by the president of the institution or their designee. They finally got a designee in there. And when you realize, when you read the bill and you read the history of it, and it's kind of stupid because first off the bat is if you want to buy Basecamp, okay?
Yeah.
Is Asana any more accessible than Basecamp? Is Basecamp any more accessible than Asana versus Jira versus Monday.com versus this versus 150,000 other personal productivity and task management software? Who knows? They're all inaccessible. And usually you find that people just want to buy the program they want to buy and they don't really care about your accessibility issue.
Right.
And in this case, they're probably right because probably every other program is equally inaccessible in some way, shape, or form. So you get into this vast Kafka-esque bureaucratic nightmare where, universities buy a lot of software. And the people inside universities buy a lot of software. faculty go out and buy all kinds of software all the time. So every day, probably 2 pieces of software are being bought by a university, at least every day, 2 to 3 pieces of software.
Mm-hmm.
And so you set this sort of charade, this empty bureaucratic nonsense where you ask people, is your software accessible? And if it's not, why not? And if it's not accessible, what's your plan to address the accessibility problems? And people are like, what on earth are you talking about? I didn't write the software.
Right.
I'm buying it off the shelf.
Right.
And so the interesting thing is that that's really where this particular law came from. Where these particular laws came from was from the big Texas state agencies like Youth Health and DHS, Department of Health Service, I forget, whatever. These big state agencies that have to basically every citizen of the state has to interact with this agency at some point. So every citizen is going to go to the state agency's website, and every citizen is going to interact with the software of the state agency at some point, like a DMV. DMVs, that website is going to be used by every able-bodied adult of the state at some point, multiple times a year.
Yeah,
if it's a DMV, and so many times the DMVs wrote their own software. They had these enormous databases that kept track of welfare benefits, that kept track of vehicles and drivers. And that's what the law was really about, because the people who were bringing lawsuits were citizens of the state, disabled citizens of the state who couldn't make heads or tails of the lawsuit, and disabled employees of the agency who couldn't make heads or tails of the software, the back-end software that was written to maintain all this data. And that's where the law came from. It was really about custom crafted websites and custom crafted software. It wasn't really meant to apply the situation where you say, I want to buy Calendly. I'm a faculty member and I just want to buy Calendly because I want to keep my I want other people to be able to book meetings with me. You know what?
But really, there's no excuse for software like web-based software like Calendly to not be accessible.
Okay.
A lot of these packages are just websites.
True.
They're web apps, and those can be made accessible. Absolutely. I was thinking, like Microsoft Word. Is it accessible? Probably by now, right? Is it? I don't know.
No software is accessible. Our experience has been, because I think I think it's an issue with the standards themselves, that they are either A, so stringent, or B, a combination of stringent and poorly defined. Like you're not really sure what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But the general feeling is that whenever people do get an ACR or a VPAT done, you never get a full compliance score. It never happens.
Yeah.
And so you get into this Kafka-esque bureaucratic nightmare where people are having to fill out reams of paperwork when all they want to do is buy a copy of Snagit. They want to buy some, and they're like, why am I filling this? This is total nonsense. Why am I filling this crap out?
Right.
I can't make it compliant. I can't make it accessible.
Right. And it's functionality I need. Yeah.
And it's functionality I need. And every other thing, even if I was willing to use a competitive product, they're inaccessible too. So what's this all about? And so, what you eventually get to is a regime where you just immediately generate an exception request. As soon as somebody submits a request, because the law was really written for a different universe. It was written for a different thing, but somehow the law was written such that it applied to all software, when really what it was meant to address was custom coded software. And everybody agrees that websites are that's the main thing, because websites are custom coded.
It's the lowest. Truthfully, it's the lowest bar. And let me just brag on myself for a minute. I partner with this company, accessibe, that you can run audits on all the sites that I have. And what I was finding was, I was convincing my clients to purchase X number $100 a year, to have the widget, to just be double safe. And I think so far I have one client that's taken this on, because when I run the audit, I do come out compliant because I have been coding and I've been keeping up.
Yeah. You build it.
But that's not true of every site, because some of the sites I haven't touched I designed them in 2014.
Right.
And accessibility just wasn't talked about. It wasn't part of the standards discussion.
Yeah.
So, I've been doing my part, but to be compliant means WCAG 2.1. I don't know what level after that, right? There's A, AA, and AAA. I haven't been paying attention to which one of those. It says compliant, I'm compliant, right? So this California law was really going to be like, nope, you got to be AA compliant.
Yeah, that's a pretty high bar.
And all that takes is your user, your client, just uploading the image and clicking save.
But going back to the original
filling out the
thing,
description.
But going back to many times, politics is, I don't want to say it's theater, but it's negotiation. Like many times people propose bills with the full knowledge that the bill will probably not pass.
but they're trying to send a message. They're trying to make a statement. They're signaling. And so same with the DOJ. The DOJ, again, like I said before, sent out this Dear Colleague letter. And they said, hey, universities, we've been talking about this shit for like 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
When are you guys going to get it together? Because we're constantly being approached by people with disabilities saying, we got to sue your asses. And you know what? They're right. Because when we actually do bring the lawsuits and we actually do the investigation, the behavior is so, you guys are just falling down. You're not handling this correctly. Yep. There are standards here. And sometimes it's really egregious. Like, these people are just shunted around. They're ignored. And man, just if you want to create a pissed off plaintiff, just do that. Just like don't answer their phone calls and don't deal with it. And so I think maybe what California's trying to do with this bill is say, you know what? The Department of Justice has a point. You guys got to get your act together. We're sick and tired of getting calls from disabled people saying they're getting screwed by you. And you know what? They are.
Yeah.
And we don't have the time to bring your stupid little lawsuits because we're busy trying to take care of more important things in this state. So why don't you just get your act together and start doing accessible resources from the get-go? And that's how the dialogue goes.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so let's sit on this for a couple of days and see if you think it's worth including. But I don't think I said anything that's terribly.
No. I think I thought it was good. And for once, we were talking about something important.
Or something that I deal with on a daily basis.
Oh yeah, but also it is pertinent and it is important. I mean, the web is how we get so much information. And if you're cutting out 20% of the population because they're colorblind or they can't see or they have epilepsy or they have cognitive disabilities of any kind, it's just or mobility issues. That's the other.
Sure.
Think about a veteran coming back with just can't use a mouse.
Right.
And you haven't designed your software or your website to be accessible to that person.
Right.
It's just wrong,
Yeah.
So it is. It's an important topic.
And here's one last part of it, which is I said accessibility benefits everybody because we all use these accessibility features and they're great for everybody. But the more important thing, but it's even more broad than that, which is that organizations need to be able to listen to their people. Organizations need to be able to hear the complaints of their stakeholders. And this is an important thing in a university. A university, it's a weird kind of organization. It's, I don't want to
sort
get
of profit-driven, but also...
Well, it's even weirder than that. It's like a little mini city, and it's all these shifting populations. It's people coming and going. But the key thing is you got to listen to these people. And how well are you listening to them? And how well are you getting information to them that they need? And how well are you processing problems and complaints? And it's hard to do. It's hard to do because that's what I do all day. I mean, that's what what a lot of people in universities do is people come to us with problems. Hey, I tried to click on that thing you told me to click on. It's not working. Oh, here we go again. Or, the student says, hey, I tried to submit my paper, but it didn't work and Hey, I was supposed to get this financial aid, but it hasn't appeared. What do I need to do next? The mark of a good institution is how effectively it processes those. And to a certain degree, the accessibility, the disabled are like a canary in a coal mine. Because if you see, if a disabled person brings a lawsuit against your university backed by the American Society for the Deaf or whatever, first off the bat, it's going to get your undivided attention, and it does. And second off the bat, that's a bellwether. It's a bellwether for your entire institution. Okay, how did we do by this person? And if we didn't do well by this person,
What about everybody else?
Yeah.
Disabled or otherwise? How well are we at the fundamental task of listening to people and solving their problems? And the answer usually is not very well. Or certainly there's room for improvement. Maybe we're all challenged, but the first step is to know how challenged you are.
Yeah.
And sometimes institutions don't even know. They don't even know how disconnected things are. And that's why I think the disability lawsuits sometimes are really good, because they really force it's like an electric jolt to the institutions that, no, you've got to pay attention. This person had a complaint. They went through they made reasonable efforts to make their complaint heard, and they got screwed.
Yep.
And so if it happened to them, how many other people is it happening to? And how are you going to fix this?
Interesting. I mean, I have not been posting transcripts for all of our podcasts, but I'm totally going to be posting a transcript for this one.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry about that long-winded thing, but I think it's, again, to a certain degree, we all benefit from the efforts of the disabled.
Yeah.
And the trials and tribulations they go through. They benefit everybody. It'd be better if they didn't have to go through trials and tribulations to begin with. But if you're gonna have a whole bunch of lemons, might as well make lemonade. Anyway, I like your closing thing about we're all disabled. We're all disabled.
We're only
temporarily
able-bodied temporarily. Chris Chandler. That man.
Okay.
All right, Lionel.
Okay, James.
I will see you next week.
Okay. See you there.
Funny Not Funny podcast is produced by me, Jim Infantino. This clip from the album Utopia Revisited. We are found wherever podcasts are found. Visit our website at funnynotfunny.bigego.com. Please tell your friends and leave a rating or review.